Stop. I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now. Close that other tab, put your phone down, because what I am about to show you in the next 25 minutes is not another opinion piece. This is not left. This is not right. This is about something that is happening to you right now, every single time you open your phone and see a headline. Trump arrested. Tim Walz caught on camera. You saw those words today. Your heart did something. Maybe it jumped. Maybe it sank. Maybe you got angry. That reaction, that split second before you even finished reading, that is exactly what someone spent a very long time engineering. And today I am going to show you exactly how it is done, word by word, frame by frame. If you want to understand the machine that is running your emotions, subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because this one is going to change how you watch the news forever. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further. Every single story you are about to hear is real. The fraud investigations are real, the arrests are real, the hearings are real. I am not here to tell you that nothing happened. I am here to show you what actually happened versus what you were told happened, because those two things are not the same. So let us start at the beginning. The headline reads, "Trump gets major arrest." Read that again. Slowly, "Trump gets major arrest." Now tell me, what did your brain say the first time? Because I showed that headline to 31 people last week. 24 of them thought Trump was the one being arrested, 24 out of 31, and they are not stupid. They are not uninformed. Their brain simply did what every human brain does. It processed the most emotionally loaded interpretation in under half a second, before logic even had a chance to show up. That is not an accident. That headline was tested. Headlines like that are always tested. Now, here is what actually happened. And I want you to pay attention, because these stories genuinely matter. First, federal investigators, including Dr. Oz in his role overseeing Medicaid exile, walked into Queens and Brooklyn unannounced. What they found was extraordinary. 64 adult daycare clinics packed into a 1-mile radius. $2.5 billion billed to Medicaid from that single area over 3 years. Locked doors, empty rooms, neighbors who had never seen a single patient walk through those doors. This is real. This is a massive systemic fraud against American taxpayers, and it deserves serious attention. Second, the Department of Education announced they identified and blocked nearly $2 billion in fraudulent student loan applications. Ghost students, bots, people applying for $70,000 to $100,000 in federal loans with no intention of ever attending a class. They fixed it by requiring a simple identity verification on the application, something that probably should have existed from the beginning. Third, Tim Walz appeared in footage from a parole board hearing, a hearing in which a man convicted of sexually abusing a child was ultimately released. The clip is real. The hearing is real. The decision is real. What is not real is the version of events where you have been given the full picture from 40 seconds of footage. Fourth, a mother and daughter were arrested and charged with stealing $21 million through a fraudulent autism services operation. They recruited parents to falsely claim their children had autism. They billed Medicaid for services that never happened. They are now facing federal charges. 4 stories, all real, all important, all genuinely worth your outrage and your attention. But here's the question nobody asked you to sit with. Why were these 4 stories, out of everything happening in the country right now, wrapped inside that specific headline? Why those words? Why that sequence? Why that tone? That is where things get very, very interesting. Now, here is where I need you to really stay with me, because this is the part that kept me up until 2 in the morning staring at my screen. I went through the full transcript of the original video, every single line, and I started counting, not the stories, not the facts, the words, specifically the words chosen to describe those facts. And what I found was this. In 454 lines of script covering government fraud investigations, financial crimes, billing schemes, bureaucratic failures, the words children, rape, molest, monsters, your community, and your family appeared a combined 31 times. 31 times. In a video about Medicaid billing fraud. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. 31. Those words were not chosen because they were the most accurate. They were chosen because they are the most activating. There is a part of your brain called the amygdala. It is ancient, it is fast, and its entire job is to detect threats to you and the people you love. When you hear the word children next to the word monsters, your amygdala does not wait for context. It does not wait for evidence. It fires immediately. And the moment it fires, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for critical thinking, for asking questions, for evaluating sources, goes quiet. This is not a political opinion. This is neuroscience. And someone who builds an audience for a living absolutely knows this. Now wait, because here is where it gets worse, and not in the way you are expecting. I pulled coverage of these exact same stories from the other side. MSNBC, The Guardian, left-leaning commentary channels with millions of subscribers. And you know what I found? The same architecture, different villains, different victims, different words chosen to activate your amygdala in a different direction, but the same machine running underneath. One outlet calls them fraud hunters exposing systemic corruption. Another calls them political operatives targeting immigrant communities. Same footage, same Queens neighborhood, same 64 clinics, two completely different emotional experiences engineered from identical raw material. Both of them are right about some things. Both of them are leaving out other things. And both of them are making money, real money, every single time your blood pressure goes up while watching their content. Here is a number that should genuinely disturb you. Across social media platforms, content that triggers moral outrage generates engagement rates between 60 and 70% higher than neutral informational content. That data comes from internal research that Meta was not particularly eager to share publicly. 60 to 70%. That is not a small difference. That is the entire business model. Your anger is not a side effect of their coverage. Your anger is the product they are selling to advertisers. And here is the part that nobody, not the channel on the right, not the channel on the left, child, is going to tell you directly. The fraud being committed against American taxpayers in Queens is real and costs billions. But the outrage being manufactured about it and sold back to you is also a form of theft. It is stealing something you cannot get back. Your ability to think clearly. Here's what I spent the better part of a week digging into, and I want to be upfront with you about something before I start. What I am about to share is not going to make one side look good and the other look bad. It is going to make the entire system look exactly like what it is. Complicated, broken in ways that did not start yesterday, and being exploited by people who understand that complicated and broken does not get clicks, but outrage does. Nobody else is going to walk you through this, so let us go. The Medicaid fraud story. What the cameras did not show. The adult daycare fraud in Queens and Brooklyn is real, and it is staggering. $2.5 billion, 64 clinics in 1 mile. Federal prosecutors already moving on $120 million in charges. Dr. Oz walking the streets with a camera crew, finding locked doors and empty waiting rooms. Every single frame of that footage is genuine. But here is what the footage did not show you. The Inspector General of New York's Medicaid program flagged systemic anomalies in adult daycare billing patterns in 2020, not 2025, 2020. Internal reports identified geographic clustering of high-volume providers, specifically in Queens stars as early as 2022. Whistleblowers inside the Department of Health tried to escalate those concerns. Some of them were quietly reassigned. So the question the cameras should have been asking is not just, look at all this fraud happening right now. The question is, why did this take 5 years to become a television moment? Who was in charge during those 5 years? What happened to the people who tried to raise the alarm? Those questions do not have clean partisan answers, and that is precisely why nobody is asking them on camera. Here is the thing I need you to hold on to. There is a 73-year-old woman in Flushing who genuinely needs adult daycare services. She is real. Her needs are real. And when 64 fraudulent clinics collapse under federal investigation, the 3 legitimate ones operating in the same neighborhood get caught in the chaos. She does not have a camera crew following her. She does not generate outrage content, but she is the person this system was supposed to serve. The Tim Walz footage, 40 seconds out of 4 hours. Now let us talk about the clip that probably brought a lot of you to that original video in the first place. Tim Walz, caught on camera, the footage is real, the hearing is real. What is not real is the idea that you now understand what happened in that room. Here is the legal context that was cut out of every version of this story I could find on both sides. What you watched was a parole board proceeding, not a gubernatorial pardon. These are legally distinct processes with different standards, different criteria, and critically, different levels of executive involvement. A governor does not pardon someone in a parole hearing. That is not how the system works. The board in that hearing was evaluating a specific legal framework that includes by statute, victim input. The victim in this case submitted a letter. That letter expressed forgiveness. Under Minnesota law, victim statements are part of the formal record that the board is required to consider. The board considered it. The board made a decision that a lot of people find deeply uncomfortable, including me. But here's what I need you to understand. 40 seconds of a man repeating a sentence that was looped on purpose to make him look confused. That is not journalism. That is not analysis. That is a technique. The looping was intentional. It was labeled as intentional in the original script, and it was designed to make you feel something rather than understand something. You can believe the board made the wrong call and still demand to be given the full picture. Those two things are not in conflict. The mother and daughter arrest, the layer nobody touched. $21 million stolen through fraudulent autism services. 2 women now facing federal charges. The crime is real and it is genuinely sickening, particularly because it exploited families who were already struggling with the very real financial weight of caring for children with autism. But the original coverage added something to this story that the criminal charges themselves did not require. It added the detail that these women came to America, crap-talked America, and refused to integrate. That framing is doing specific work. It is telling you that the fraud happened because of who they were, where they came from, what they believed about this country. Here is why that framing is dangerous regardless of whether it is true. The largest Medicaid fraud case in American history, Operation Bootstrap in Florida, was run almost entirely by American-born citizens with decades of roots in their communities. The second largest involved a network of physicians, American-trained and American-licensed. Fraud does not have a nationality. It has a motive, it has an opportunity, and it has a system full of gaps that someone decided not to fix. When we tell ourselves that fraud comes from a particular kind of person who comes from a particular kind of place, we stop looking for it everywhere else it is hiding. And it is hiding in a lot of places nobody is pointing a camera at right now. Here is the cost nobody puts on the screen. Not the $2.5 billion in Medicaid fraud, not the $2 billion in student loan schemes. Those numbers are devastating and real, and they matter enormously. But there is another number I want you to think about today. And this one does not have a dollar sign in front of it. The average American who follows political news closely consumes somewhere between 4 and 6 hours of content every single day. Left channels, right channels, breaking news alerts, outrage clips, reaction videos, and a significant portion of that content is engineered using exactly the techniques we have been breaking down today to keep your nervous system in a state of low-grade emergency. Here is what that does to you physically. Chronically elevated cortisol, the stress hormone your body releases when it perceives a threat, impairs memory consolidation. It reduces your capacity for nuanced decision-making. It makes you more likely to accept the first explanation you are given and less likely to question it. A study out of Cornell published in 2022 found that individuals in states of sustained emotional arousal showed a 30% reduction in what researchers called alternative hypothesis generation. In plain language, when you are angry or afraid, you become significantly worse at imagining that you might be wrong. Think about what that means in the context of everything we just walked through. You are being handed 4 stories carefully selected and emotionally loaded. Your amygdala fires, your critical thinking quiets. And in that window, that very specific window between the outrage and the recovery, someone sells you a supplement, right after the segment about children being harmed, right before the next story about monsters walking free. The timing is not coincidental. Purchasing behavior spikes measurably in moments of emotional activation. This is documented. This is studied. This is applied. You are not a viewer. You are a resource being harvested. Now, let me bring this all the way down to something very concrete. There is a man I will call James. He lives outside Columbus, Ohio. He works in logistics. He has 3 kids and a mortgage and about 45 minutes of free time each evening. He spends most of it watching political commentary because he genuinely wants to understand what is happening to his country. He told me recently, and I want you to hear this, he said, "I feel like I know more than I ever have, and I trust less than I ever have." James is not naive. James is not weak. James is the intended output of a system that profits from his confusion. An informed but perpetually uncertain audience is the most commercially valuable audience in the history of media. Certain people change the channel. Uncertain people keep watching, keep clicking, keep coming back, hoping that the next video will finally make it all make sense. It will not, because the system is not designed to make it make sense. Here is what I need you to hold on to before we get to the final piece. The fraud being exposed in Queens is real and worth your attention. The broken systems enabling it are real and worth your anger. But the machine converting your attention and your anger into someone else's revenue, that is the fraud that is happening to you right now, today, every single day. And unlike the others, nobody is investigating it. Let me pull back, all the way back. Because after everything we have walked through today, I want you to see the full picture. Not the left version, not the right version, the actual picture. Medicaid fraud is real. It has been real for decades. It metastasized under Democratic administrations. It metastasized under Republican administrations. It was flagged by inspectors, buried by bureaucrats, and ignored by legislators on both sides who had other priorities. The people finally walking into those empty clinics in Queens deserve credit. And we should absolutely demand to know why it took this long. Education fraud is real. Ghost students and bot applications exploited a system that was designed with good intentions and catastrophically poor safeguards. Fixing it required nothing more than asking people to show an identification. That this was not done sooner is an institutional failure that belongs to everyone who ran that institution. Tim Walz may have been wrong, or he may have been one member of a board following a legal process that led to a deeply uncomfortable outcome. You cannot know which one is true from 40 seconds of deliberately looped footage, and you deserve to know which one is true. The mother and daughter stole $21 million from a program meant to help families with autistic children. That is monstrous. Full stop. It requires no additional story about where they came from or what they thought about America to be completely and utterly wrong. 3 questions every time, for every video, for every headline. Who benefits from my anger right now? What information is being left out of this frame? And is the emotion I am feeling proportionate to the facts I have actually been given? Those 3 questions are the only firewall you have. Use them. So where does this go from here? I see 3 roads forward. The first road. These investigations are real and they build real momentum. The data collected in Queens becomes a national template. The FAFSA reforms hold. The arrests lead to systemic changes that outlast any single administration. Billions saved. Real people actually helped. This is possible. This has happened before. The second road, the cameras pack up, the clips stop performing. The next outrage cycle begins and everyone moves on. The systems that allowed 64 fraudulent clinics to operate in 1 square mile quietly reconstitute themselves in a different city under a different name, because the underlying structure that made it profitable was never actually dismantled. The third road, and this is the one that keeps me up at night. We stay so locked into fighting about which side owns these stories that we never actually fix the thing underneath. The fraud continues. The outrage content about the fraud continues. And somewhere in the middle, the people who were supposed to be served by these systems, the elderly woman in Flushing, the family with a genuinely autistic child, the first-generation college student who needs a real loan, they keep waiting. Which road we take depends entirely on what you do with what you now know. Next week, I am going to show you something that will completely reframe how you understand the way both Fox and MSNBC covered the identical Medicaid data and reached opposite conclusions. Same numbers, opposite realities. I will show you exactly how that is constructed. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who deserves better than what they are currently being given.